Hey all, this is Matthew here, and I do apologize for taking so long to work on this one. Mainly just because I've just been waved, 100% just waved. But I'm here now, and yeah, we're gonna get right down to it. I do want to just say a little bit of an announcement in terms of these going forward. So I'm changing the format a little bit. I'm gonna be doing more so specific subject based podcasts, deep talks. Just basically what I used to do before all the dark times happened and the like. So yeah, just wanted to make sure I gave you guys a heads up in case you're like, wait, where's the freaking, where's the podcast stuff? Where's the diary stuff? So yeah, I'm gonna be more so doing actual subject matter. It may be like pretty long videos, maybe pretty short. It's just going to depend on what I'm covering. Especially since I'm going to try to just make them single subject little discussions and whatnot. So yeah, because I'd rather have quality than quantity in terms of like how long they are. So yeah. Um, but yeah, let's get started. So with this one, the first one is going to be talking about modesty as a Christian. And I know in general these days it is a bit not even of like a tricky subject matter because it is a very straightforward thing, especially when it comes to Christians these days. It's it can be a little tricky, actually, you know, especially if they're newer to being a Christian in regards to showing skin. Whether honestly, I would say this definitely applies to both men and women. Um, as a guy, you shouldn't just be like walking around, with your shirt off at the beach, sort of thing like that, excessively so. You know, same with a woman, and I know these days it is so the line between like private wear, like your bra, your panties, whatever the case is, and a swimsuit is fundamentally it's just so very thin these days, And, a lot of the question, a lot of the very much, copy and paste concerns or sarcastic concerns as I like to call them, um is like, hey, what am I supposed to do? Just wear, wear it excessively, um, modest thing. And I'm gonna be honest, yes and no. You can still there are some very nice one pieces, that very much show are fashionable and that look really nice, but don't show a lot of skin. Um, and I mean, I think that's the thing at the end of the day is they know the answer to the question. Like especially as Christians, um, we definitely shouldn't have an issue with telling other Christians and calling them out in terms of like, especially when in this modesty thing, um, being like, hey, like that's not modest, or like, hey, like you're married, right? Like that. Do you think your husband? Do you think God um, would approve of what you're wearing right now? Like you showing everything, and that's the thing. That's the thing that a lot of, I would say, unfortunately, a lot of women these days, in the modern age, do tend to forget is like, especially when you're in a relationship, when you're in marriage, you know, you shouldn't just be showing your body off to the world. Your body, like you showing off your body, should be for, like for your husband. Your husband, not strangers on the internet, not strangers, you know, when you're walking around. Um, and it is hard to get that through. It is hard to get that through with the importance of modesty, with the importance of not just pushing, aside what your husband says and whatnot, you know, because and also, I would even say like, if you're at the engagement stage, if you're at the even I would say at the courtship stage still, um, I would say very much so. Like if they're pushing back on that, that's how it's gonna be going forward in general. Unless they wake up to the reality of like, hey, I'm not doing what's right here. Like I know better. That's what I was saying earlier. It's very much a common sense thing. When I say like, as a Christian, you yourself should be self-reflective enough um, to be like, hey, this is not appropriate. If the best question I would say that as a guy you can tell your girl or tell your wife, um, calling her out or like being honestly calling her out, but also being very much so constructive criticism, but more so than criticism, actually like fundamentally reminding them of their responsibility as a Christian, to be a good example. Because if, all the other, non believers and stuff see that you're wearing basically the same thing as someone who isn't a Christian, right? Like, that, what does that tell them? It's like, oh, well, they're like us, no, you need to, like, actually show and be a good example. So, yeah, with that, it's a very, very tricky situation. But yeah, that'll be it for now. But we'll see what goes on in the next one. I think I'll probably do a double thing maybe next time, but we will have to see because I think the next one is going to be what was the other one? Oh, you know what? I totally mind for it there. But if anything, probably the next one would just be like a quick talk about what I'm thinking of doing for my gaming channel. Um, with like history and stuff like that because I do really want to start doing my history stuff. But yeah, we will have to see on that. But yeah, but anyways, this is the end of this talk in general. But yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky these days to get across just the fundamental basis of like, hey, as a Christian, it should be common sense. It should be second nature to be like, hey, is this thing modest? You know, and especially as a guy, is this modest for my girl? Am I glorifying God by her? Like, is she glorifying God by wearing this skimpy type thing? And I'm myself. I do tend to be very, very chill, very passive. Very easygoing with it, and that's on me. I need to be taking a harder stance on it, even though it is a turbulent subject. But yeah, I digress. This is Matthew logging out, and au revoir.